All right, so you guys ready for some more cult albums? No, not that cult. Cult albums. Remember, we're talking about records that didn't hit the mainstream really, or maybe did briefly and then were gone and forgotten, but have since sort of gathered this devoted following, especially amongst serious music fans. That kind of cult album. Well, let's get into it. I got five more for you. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. This is, I guess, the third video we've done on cult albums where I pick five cult albums that I think are pretty awesome that maybe you should explore. Uh, yeah, the first two videos are pretty, at least relatively for us, pretty popular. So I figured I'd do a third one. I found a good batch here. I think this is going to be kind of interesting. And like I said, before the intro, when we say a cult album, we're talking about records that that have sort of developed a pretty devoted fan base over time that maybe didn't weren't there when they came out. Uh, yeah, by and large, you don't hear them on the radio or anything like that. That's a loose definition of a cult album, right? So I got five more, and kind of like I did before, I'm not ranking them or anything. I'm just going to go in chronological order of release, so it makes sense. So the first one I got came out in 1966. I have it on CD here. The Remains. The only record this band put out, like in their youth, they have as older guys, they have reformed. I think they were like in the late '90s and sort of got on that garage circuit or whatever, so kind of nostalgia circuit. But in their prime in the '60s, they only put out this one record, The Remains. It's a nice CD because it's got that original record and it's got a bunch of bonus tracks, I guess, standalone singles and everything else. The Remains. So it's basically a garage band from the Boston area. They made a pretty big name for themselves, along New England, East Coast, but not really beyond that. I guess their big claim to fame, they opened for the Beatles for a little stretch on the final tour that the Beatles did before they stopped doing concerts and doing tours and stuff. And how do you describe it? It's really good. It is kind of garage rock, but real good production, pretty good songwriting. Kind of a good pop sense. So honestly, it's sort of garage, but it's not all that raw. There's really good sort of pop chops, but awesome. I first heard the Remains, of course, on the legendary Nuggets collection, and they had a track on. Let's see I forget the name. It was like their one sort of semi-hit. Is it on here? Well, see, there's like a 4 CD. No, it is. Yeah, it is here on the original Nuggets. Don't Look Back. Don't Look Back was the one, I mean, kind of semi-hit, that the Nuggets had. The Nuggets, the Remains that the Remains had on the Nuggets collection. Anyway, check it out. Good stuff. My second one, also from 1966. Now this band actually did have quite a bit of chart commercial success. But as the '60s sort of progressed, they didn't. I don't know. They got kind of lost in the shuffle. They were sort of dismissed as kind of gimmicky and sort of pop, whatever. And once the psychedelic bands came along in the mid to late '60s, I don't know, they sort of fell out of fashion. They weren't seen as really cool or whatever. But they did have some pop success. But yeah, I think since then, by and large, sort of been, I don't want to say forgotten, but not talked about as much anymore. But they were really good. Who am I talking about? Talking about Paul Revere and the Raiders. Paul Revere and the Raiders. And my pick here is their 1966 album Midnight Ride. When I say gimmicky, well, I think unfortunately, in hindsight, one of the things they did is they dressed up in these costumes. Editor can throw some pics up, but uh, sort of trying to capitalize on their name, Paul Revere and the Raiders. These sort of revolutionary, war era costumes. So not so cool. you know, as the mid to late '60s progressed, and like I said, they were, I don't know, kind of stuck on the pop charts for a while. So they didn't really catch on in that zeitgeist of the psychedelic stuff and all that. But in hindsight, some really good stuff. And this record, especially, kind of like the Remains, it's kind of garagey, but also with a real good pop sense. Uh, just all the Kicks was kind of a great rocker. Um, Stepping Stone, of course, I believe Neil Diamond wrote that, right? But it was a hit for the Monkees. They do a version of that on here. That's great. Yeah, I mean, this is just, it's good kind of pop garage rock from the '60s, and again, a band that was sort of dismissed quite a bit, but I don't, it shouldn't be. And again, I think in more recent times, um, people sort of appreciate them a little bit more. All right, now moving on to 1967. This is a group I have mentioned before, I think, like on my ranking lists when we were way back in the '60s. I do love this group. They only put out 3 records, two of which I think are awesome. The third one was, so they're already sort of falling apart by that time, but I think still all right. So, I could have picked their debut or I could have picked the second record. I think both records are kind of equally amazing. I give the slight edge to the second record, so that's the one I'll officially go with. This is another group that sort of received a second life through the Nuggets compilation. Um, yeah, well, I mean that's on here, and it's actually it's probably their most well-known track, but it's from their first record. The first record, talking about the 13th Floor Elevators, the psychedelic sounds of the 13th Floor Elevators was their debut, and "You're Gonna Miss Me" was the one song that was on that Nuggets collection that people are sort of familiar with. For my list here, though, I'm going with their second record, which is "Easter Everywhere" from 1967, and I have it on this sort of re-release picture disc. So this is the album. This would have been the that's kind of what the album art would have looked like. And then you got kind of cool here on the second side. You got the different band members there, track listing, and all that. So I don't know, kind of hold it up like that. But yeah, so what is this? So these guys, I'm not. I'm just gonna talk. You know what? Editor can throw Easter Everywhere up there while I talk about it because I'm keep holding up the picture disc. Um, yeah, just put it down there. There it is. So this was a group actually that came out of my hometown of Houston. So yeah, it's kind of hometown guys. Although they kind of moved to the Austin area where they really kind of made their name, and then had a brief period where they kind of went out to San Francisco and toured a little bit nationally. But they're a Texas psychedelic band, which I love talking about. Mythic band, short-lived, tragic in some way. You look at some of the fates of some of the band members. Of course, singer Rocky Erickson was just a force of nature vocally. Man, just a rock and roll howl. And one of the acid casualties. Kind of along the lines of a Sid Barrett or a Skip Spence or something like that. Spent some time in some mental institutions and that kind of thing. Although had kind of a decent recovery later in his life, later in his career, and so, kind of restarted his music, and which was pretty cool. He's no longer with us, but Rocky Erickson. Guitarist Stacy Sutherland was real underrated. God, that guy was good. He had a tragic end too. He was shot in Houston, some mysterious circumstances, and of course, one of their signature sounds, which turns a lot of people off, is the electric jug, played by Tommy Hall. If you listen to their music, a lot of times you hear this like it's really strange sound, and I don't know. I don't mind it. I think it's kind of groovy, but it turns a lot of people off. And their records too have real sort of lo-fi kind of murky production, which in this case adds to the sound. I mean it's hard to explain, but that sort of murky production adds to the mystery and just makes it sound almost otherworldly. It's just great, kind of otherworldly, psychedelic, mysterious, really great stuff. Check out the 13th Floor Elevators, and if you can take Tommy Hall's, it's not bad. It's not bad. All right, moving up to 1973. I can't believe I had to wait to a third cult album video to talk about this record. I mean, I don't know. This is awesome. Kind of legendary. It's never been reissued, so you gotta find kind of some original. I don't think it's ever been reissued, at least not in recent decades. You know, but so you gotta find an old copy somewhere. I've seen them somewhat pricey. I found mine. This is a great story. I found mine for $1. $1 at a great local record store. Um, I'm in San Antonio now, and Crazy Rhythms. A little shout out to Crazy Rhythms. It's a great San Antonio record store, and you find some real gems in there with some great prices. They know what they're doing. It's not that they don't know how to price things, because they also price things you know higher. But for whatever reason, it's just like whenever I go in there, they just pick some and just put these amazing prices on them and just scatter them out there. And I found Buckingham Knicks. Have to censor it a little bit here, but Buckingham Knicks for $1. Now, in this case, there's a little water damage here on the, I mean the album art, the cover is pretty rough, but the record itself is in really good shape. I mean, it plays great. Uh, I guess because of maybe some of the damage to the cover or whatever. The buck. Thank you, Crazy Rhythms. Anyway, Buckingham Nicks, of course. Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks. This is the debut album from those two prior to their association with Fleetwood Mac, of course. And it was this record that Mick Fleetwood heard and was so impressed that he asked them to join Fleetwood Mac. And of course, the rest is history, as you know. This is, I think, genuinely fantastic. Um, yeah, I mean, I totally understand Mick Fleetwood hearing this and it's like, I got to get those guys. I got to get those two in this band, because I mean, you can hear some of the just incredible pop songwriting from the get go. Yeah, just it's kind of funny. If you look at the credits here, I'd never noticed this. Stevie Nicks is credited as Stevi is how Stevie is, and added the E to the end at that point. Anyway, but yeah, you know the story. These two were obviously a couple, lovers. Um, broke up during Rumors era. Chronicled that on some of those great songs on Rumors, of course. Uh, they don't like each other very much now. I mean, they're to this day sniping at each other on social media and whatever. But back in the day, they were a team. And this really is just fantastic. Like I said, you can just kind of hear the roots of their songs later you'd hear in Fleetwood Mac. I mean, not exact songs, but I mean, roots of the sound, I should say. And a song like Frozen Love, which is it's like 7-something minutes, it's almost progressive. It's got these different sections to it. Just and Lindsey Buckingham's guitar playing is just, I mean, it's awesome here. I mean, this is worth finding, especially if you can find it for $1. All right. My final choice, I got to jump up to 1982, and I've got to give a shout out to Vinyl Richie, our friend Vinyl Richie, because it was one of his videos that made me go get this album. The band Wall of Voodoo is the group. Call of the West, I believe their second album. I just have it on CD at this point. I'd love to find it on vinyl. I just have it on CD at this point. Call of the West. Now, their one kind of radio hit was almost sort of the novelty sounding Mexican Radio, which is on here. Great song. And that's the thing. I'd always known that song, and I always liked that song, but I just kind of figured they were a one-off, novelty act. And then I saw Vinyl Richie's video where I think this was in his countdown for 1982, when this came out, and he was talking about it, and kind of intrigued by his description and explanation. So I went and grabbed one, and this is, I mean, you'll probably see this in my 1982 video. This is a fantastic record. I mean, all the way through. Yeah, Mexican Radio is cool. It's always been kind of a cool, quirky song, but this whole thing is really good. I mean, how do you describe this? So they were sort of an underground band from the Los Angeles area. That's probably why Vinyl Richie's a big fan. And again, they kind of had that hit, the one real hit, Mexican Radio. I mean, how do you describe this to me? It's sort of this strange combination of sort of krautrocky, uh, Devo-ish, but sort of equal parts like Ennio Morricone, with these really strange sort of Western soundscapes, but with drum machines and some programming, and then this sort of eerie harmonica comes in and out on these different songs. It's hard to describe, but underneath all the weirdness are some really solid songs. I mean, just really good songwriting, interesting songwriting, both lyrically and musically. Lost Weekend, I think, is really moody and just awesome. Yeah, Call the West is a great song. I like it all the way through. Check this out. Like I said, I'll be talking about this again in my 1982 video. I'm just telling you, this is so good. So thanks, Vinyl Richie. All right. Another 5 cult albums for you. In the comments, let's keep talking cult albums. What are some that that you like? Maybe we hadn't talked about in this or the previous videos, and we ought to be checking out. All right, we'll see you next time.